Imagine a billionaire, draped in opulence, commanding a room of elite power players. Then, in a single moment, he utters a secret in Arabic, and the only voice that answers is the black maid. No one noticed. What unfolds is a tale of betrayal, hidden identities, and a truth so explosive it shatters empires. Dive into this gripping 5,000-word story. But don't stop there. Subscribe now to unlock more pulse-pounding narratives that unravel the secrets of the powerful, delivered straight to your inbox every week. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the story revolution. The billionaire spoke in Arabic, and only the black maid replied. Silencing the room, the chandelier above the grand dining hall of the Al-Hariri estate glittered like a constellation trapped in crystal, casting prismatic light across the faces of the 32 guests seated around the mahogany table. It was the kind of gathering that could shift the world's economy with a single handshake. Tech moguls, oil tycoons, a senator, a British lord, and a scattering of hedge fund titans, all sipping vintage Chateau Lafite from glasses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. At the head of the table sat Khalid al-Harari, the billionaire host, his tailored Armani suit as sharp as his reputation. His dark eyes scanned the room, a predator's calm masking the storm brewing within. The air was thick with the scent of truffle-infused dishes and the low hum of calculated small talk. No one noticed Amina, the black maid, moving silently along the edges of the room, her tray of champagne flutes steady in her hands. She was invisible, as always, her presence as unremarkable as the polished silverware. That is, until Khalid leaned forward, his voice cutting through the chatter like a blade, and spoke in flawless Arabic. Al-Hakaka Tokman, Fi al-Samt, Lakin Man Yatro, Allah al. The truth lies in silence, but who dares to speak? The room fell quiet, forks paused mid-air, eyes darting in confusion. Arabic. Why would Khalid, who'd built his empire in London and New York, speak in a language none of his guests understood? Then, from the shadows, Amina's voice answered, soft but clear, in perfect Arabic. Ana April, I dare. The silence that followed was deafening. Every head turned toward Amina, her dark skin glistening under the chandelier's glow, her maid's uniform suddenly seeming out of place, like a costume she'd chosen to wear. Khalid's lips twitched into a smile, but his eyes held something else: recognition, perhaps, or fear. The guests exchanged glances, their discomfort palpable. Who was this woman? Why was she a maid, speaking to a billionaire in a language that bound them in a secret no one else could decipher? Lord Harrington, a ruddy-faced man with a penchant for whiskey and arrogance, cleared his throat. Khalid, what's the meaning of this? Who is she? He demanded, his British accent dripping with indignation. Amina didn't flinch. She set her tray down with deliberate care and stepped into the light, her gaze locking onto Khalid. Shall I tell them, Saidi? She asked, her Arabic laced with an intimacy that made the senator shift uncomfortably in his seat. Khalid raised a hand, silencing her, but the gesture was too late. The room was no longer his. Amina's story began 20 years earlier, in a small village in Sudan, where she was born. Fatima Mahmoud, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a poet. Her childhood was one of books and dreams, her father's verses painting a world beyond the dusty streets of their home. But war came, as it always did, and with it, the flames that devoured her village. At 15, Fatima fled, her parents' voices fading into the screams of that night. She crossed borders, survived refugee camps, and eventually landed in London, where survival meant becoming Amina, the invisible maid who scrubbed floors and poured wine for the elite. But Amina was no ordinary maid. She'd carried her father's intellect and her mother's fire, teaching herself languages in stolen moments: Arabic, English, French, and more. She listened, always listening, as the powerful men and women she served spilled their secrets, unaware of the mind behind the apron. Khalid, however, was different. He'd noticed her not as a maid, but as something else entirely. Their first encounter had been a year ago, in his private study, when she'd overheard him muttering in Arabic about a deal that could destabilize entire economies. She'd responded, unthinking, in his native tongue, and his shock had quickly turned to fascination. From that moment, a dangerous dance began. Khalid's empire was built on more than oil and tech. Beneath the surface lay a network of illicit transactions, money laundering, arms deals, and a cryptocurrency scheme so intricate it could topple governments if exposed. Amina, with her knack for languages and her invisibility in plain sight, became his unwitting ally. He'd slip her coded messages in Arabic, disguised as casual remarks, and she'd decode them, passing information to his contacts without ever leaving the room. She was perfect. No one suspected the maid. But Amina was no pawn. Each message she carried, she memorized. Each secret she overheard, she stored. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building a weapon. Tonight, at this gala, she'd planned to play her final card. The guests were growing restless. The senator, a man named Richard Callahan, leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. Khalid, explain yourself. What's going on here? Khalid's smile didn't waver, but his fingers tightened around his glass. Amina is an associate, he said carefully, his English accent polished to perfection. She has a talent for languages. The room buzzed with murmurs. An associate, a maid. Lord Harrington scoffed. This is absurd. What game are you playing, El Harari? But Amina wasn't done. She stepped closer to the table, her voice steady. No game, my lord, she said, her English now carrying the faintest trace of her Sudanese accent. I know things. About all of you. The air grew heavy, the guests' faces paling, as her words sank in. She turned to Callahan. Senator, your offshore accounts in the Caymans, how much did you funnel to that shell company last month? 3 million. 4. Callahan's face turned ashen. She pivoted to Harrington. And you, my lord, that land deal in Scotland, did you think no one knew about the bribes? Harrington's whiskey glass slipped from his hand, shattering. On the floor, Khalid stood, his chair scraping against the marble. Enough, Amina, he said, his voice a low growl. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. For years, she'd been the shadow in the room, the one who cleaned up their messes, literal and figurative. Now, she was the storm. Khalid, she said, her Arabic soft but lethal. La yumkinuk iskata hakikalan. You cannot silence the truth forever. The guests didn't understand her words, but they felt their weight. Khalid's composure cracked, just for a moment, and in that crack, Amina saw her chance. She reached into her apron and pulled out a small USB drive, holding it up like a talisman. This, she said, switching back to English, contains everything. Your deals, your lies, your crimes. I've been listening for years, and I'm done being silent. Chaos erupted. Callahan lunged for the drive, but Amina was faster, stepping back as Khalid barked orders to his security team, who materialized from the corners of the room. The guests scrambled, some shouting, others frozen in panic. A woman in a red gown, a tech CEO named Vanessa Chen, screamed, "She's bluffing. She's nobody." But Amina's eyes burned with a fire that silenced even Chen. "Nobody," she said. "I was born Fatima Mahmoud. I survived a war you funded, Senator. I cleaned your houses, Lord Harrington, while you sold my people's land. I poured your wine, Ms. Chen, while you coded algorithms to exploit the poor. I am not nobody. I am the one who sees you." The room was a tableau of guilt, every face a mask of fear or defiance. Khalid moved toward her, his voice low, almost pleading. "Fatima, don't do this. You don't know what you're unleashing." But she did. She knew exactly what was on that drive. Evidence of a conspiracy that linked Khalid's empire to a shadow network of global elites. A cabal that manipulated markets, governments, and wars for profit. She'd spent years piecing it together, using her access as a maid to gather fragments of their world. The drive held emails, recordings, and ledgers enough to bring them all down. But there was a twist she hadn't anticipated. Khalid's eyes flickered with something beyond fear, perhaps, or love. "You were never just a maid to me," he said in Arabic, so softly only she could hear. "I trusted you." The words hit her like a blow. For a moment, she faltered, remembering the late nights in his study, the way he'd looked at her, not as a servant, but as an equal. Had it been real, or was it another manipulation? Before she could answer, the lights went out. The room plunged into darkness, and screams filled the air. Amina clutched the drive, her heart pounding. When the lights flickered back on, Khalid was gone. The guests were in disarray, some rushing for the exits, others shouting for security. Amina stood alone, the drive still in her hand, but a new figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, tall and severe, her face obscured by a scarf. "Give it to me," she said in Arabic, her voice cold as steel. Amina froze. She knew that voice. It was Layla, Khalid's sister, the one person he'd never mentioned in their coded exchanges. Layla, who'd vanished from public view years ago, rumored to be dead. But here she was, alive, and her eyes held a promise of violence. "You don't understand what you're holding," Layla said. "That drive isn't just evidence. It's a weapon, and you're not the only one who wants it." Amina's mind raced. She'd thought Khalid was the puppet master, but Layla's presence